Drums carry the whole song, to the point that this could technically be a festival trap, a speed house-ish thing, or drum and bass, which, not gonna lie, fits the best here. That being said, it would be a shame to have this key element sound whack and boring. Luckily, Ableton has some cool tricks up on the sleeve to make your drums stand out. And no, I'm not talking about the drum boss device. It's cool, but I can't get the hype for it, since you can get the same or even better results with stock compressor, roar, or even the basic saturator. But more on that later. Speaking of drums by themselves, you can go with MIDI and audio. And despite what people say, they both hit the same. It's only the volume knob on Simpler or Drum Sampler that makes MIDI sound weaker. And if that really bothers you, you can always just click on it, turn it to 0, and save this one as default preset. But there is a new way to play with drums, a sequencer called rhythmic steps. Yes, one less reason for FL Studio guys to bully us. If sequencers are not your cup of tea, then feel free to skip to the next chapter, but it can really help you to come up with cool patterns, so think twice. So I have 4 main sounds inside this drum rack, and now I need to show the sequencer which pads it needs to play by clicking here. Now, let's set up a simple pattern. Those are sliders, which are basically determining the chance of the sound being triggered. Those are on 100%, but if I will try to do something here... So sequencer basically randomly decides which sound are gonna be played based on this chance parameter. Now let's set up a hi-hat real quick, and maybe randomize the chance here. And set up a simple perk pattern here. But the real fun starts once you start to play with variations, and as you can hear, I have different hat variations here, and a second variation for the perk. So let's go to this alternative tab and maybe randomize the variation of the hi-hat here. And randomize the variation for our perk sound. One tricky thing is that it plays over and over, no matter which part of the session you are. And to move forward, I need to turn it to MIDI. It is as simple as creating new MIDI track, but make sure it's blank with no audio effects. Then dragging the rhythmic steps inside our newly created MIDI track. Then selecting the output to our drum rack and pressing record on the drum rack here. Okay, I don't know if it's just me growing up on listening to rock and metal, but I always add drum fills. Not saying it's a must to have them, but they can give you that call and response effect, which basically makes everything sound cooler. There are a lot of drum fills to choose inside basically all the sample packs, but I swear the next time I'm gonna hear this basic old Kashmir one, then I'm gonna find you and show you how to make your custom ones. The fastest way is to chop some drum breaks. So first thing to do is to right click on this drum break and choose slice to new MIDI track. And don't go too crazy with the amount of slices. I think 16 fits the best here. Okay, so I want my drum fill to happen at the end of this bar. So let's create a new MIDI clip and then play with seed option from generate tab. Let's just try maybe a duration of our slices from 1/4 to 1/16. Then to be safe, just press this legato button. And we actually have something cool right at the start. Okay, so that is basically the fastest and easiest way. What the fuck just happening? Okay. Obviously, you can go with really custom drum fills by choosing some of your favorite drum sounds, putting them inside drum rack, and then using the same seed methods. So let's create a new MIDI track here, then switch duration to, let's just say 1/16 to 1/8, and simply press generate. It's simple, but I like it. Next step requires a bit more clear vision, and let's face it, drum rack MIDI clips are not the most transparent to view drums. Luckily, there is an easy way to turn each of drum rack sound into audio. First thing is to click this button inside drum rack, which is basically gonna show us how many chains we have. And now for the basic one, like kick and snare, I can just right click and choose extract chain for my kick, then extract chain for my snare, and as you can see it shows up here. And then as we have a bunch of variations for those perks, we can actually group our hi-hat and hat variation to one group, select extract chains, and the last bit is our perk, once again with its variation, extract chains, and there we go, and we can drag and drop our sounds back to the group. And you know, obviously those are all in MIDI, but you know what you gotta do. Select all, and then press freeze and flatten tracks. I'm a big advocate of spending a couple more minutes to find the perfect sound instead of trying to fix things with EQs and compressors later on. More on proper mixing later, but if you really want to fit those sounds inside your mix, layering takes a huge part of it. Real layering is an art, and it deserves a separate video, but if you want to quickly add a little bit of spice to your sounds, then make yourself friends with Corpus. I'm gonna put it on my snare, and obviously there are different modes to choose, but for snares especially, I really like to use the pipe one. Now yeah, it's a little bit too much, so let's turn down the decay and actually tune it to the key of our song. So the opening knob makes it really easy to control the tone here. And don't be afraid to use Corpus's preset, especially the legendary kick type one. If you feel like your kick is sounding a little bit weak, trust me, it works better than yet another overpriced emulation of Pultec. Speaking of investing though, it's good to have at least a couple of different sound effects or Foley sample packs, because, not gonna lie, it's kind of my secret weapon, but whenever I drag and drop something from here, I mean, those are ridiculously good when it comes to drums. You know what? We can actually layer this thing on top of our snare. A short reverb on a drum boss, it's the most underrated thing. But by applying it, you commit the cardinal sin of putting reverb on a kick. But I think I came up with the cleanest solution. First of all, let's put everything besides the kick in one the subgroup, and call it tops. Then put this compressor on a drum boss. It's a stock compressor with sidechain listen option on and no filtering. I made it for myself so I don't need to do this all the time when I'm applying the compressor. Now let's just select our kick as a sidechain source. Unfortunately, it's named drum rack since I was too lazy to rename it. Then just group this compressor. And we can duplicate this chain actually to make it a little bit faster. But for this second one, instead of audio from our kick, that's gonna be the audio from our tops. So as you can hear, nothing changed besides of dividing this whole drum rack into a kick only and our tops. Let's just apply a short hybrid reverb on our tops and then just simply play with dry and wet and parameters. And before you roast me in the comments, yes, I know I could just make two different chains, one being dry, one being the reverb one, and then apply EQ8 and filter low end, but let me tell you something. I can still hear the kick transient inside this group, and it might be cool for some other genres, but as we speak about drum and bass and EDM in general, you want your kick as clean as possible, without any distractions. Now it's time to glue everything together, and just like I said before, the basic glue compressor does the job pretty damn well. There's no point in giving you specific settings as some gurus do, because it all depends on your tempo, genre, and in fact the pattern by itself. In this case, I think I don't want the regular glue, since those drums sound cool by themselves, so let's just try to do something with parallel compression. There is a lot of punch already in this drum boss, so I don't need to make it a slow attack parallel compression one, so let's just try to control those attacks and transients actually. Then put it at fast release as well, I guess. Obviously ratio up. Or maybe just lower the threshold a bit. Increase the makeup. If you're bored of stock glue compressor, there is a cool Max for Light device by Mono. It's not mandatory to use it, but I really like to use it from time to time since it gives much more control to work with. It's a little bit more punchy, so let's just stick with this compressor for now. And do the same thing actually. But obviously it's parallel compression, so we need to blend this thing. For the fun stuff and adding grit, raw is a go-to. So let's just start with the big crusher one. Then for drums, let's activate envelope following. Then basically increase the threshold to catch only the peaks of drums. And maybe put release down to make it react a little bit faster. Now let's set the amount. And the matrix, let's actually map the shaper amount to envelope follower. Maybe let's choose a different shaper this time. And the most underrated knob inside Roar is this tone one. As you can see, you can easily control the tone of the whole drum bus by just playing with it. I think I want to make it a little bit brighter. And you know what? A Roar setup like that with envelope following actually works kind of like a transient shaper. And speaking of transient shapers, there is a cool one called Carver. Besides of a classic attack and sustain controls, it also has a cool option to increase or decrease the length of the transient. And as you can see, it's all happening with the visual feedback. So that could be your attack and transient, or if you just bring it down, you can just enhance the click. Same goes for the sustain. You can also use the drive option here. Another cool thing is that you can set the transient shaping curve to punchy, classic or natural. So obviously for the attack of our kick and snare, let's go with punchy. I feel like this video is slowly turning into a masterclass, so before we move into final touches, let me know down in the comments if you like this type of in-depth tutorials on my channel. In case you're living under the rack and slept on the rise of clippers, using them in EDM is mandatory. There are many or even too many options on the market, but since I promised you the stock solutions, let's stick with the stock saturator inside Ableton. There are two things that gonna matter to us the most: the saturation type, and the second parameter is soft clipping or hard clipping. If you need a bit more saturation and color to your drum boss, then go with analog clip option and soft clipping with the color mode enabled, and then just simply drive it. Sounds cool, but in my example, I already did a bunch of work with saturation and there's no point of adding more and more. So in my case, let's go with the digital clip and then hard clipping option to just tame the transient, turn off the control, and then just control the whole drum boss and its volume with hard clipping. I've been yapping for quite some time now, so let's just do a quick before and after comparison. You know what? I think we all got fooled into thinking that drums need a lot of processing, tons of gates, SSL emulations, or Magic Drum Boss plugins. I agree. Some of tracks do, but if my video haven't convinced you, then watch this video breakdown of one of the biggest EDM songs. Despite of a little mess inside the session, Dylan shows that there was close to no processing on his drums here. It shows how important proper sound selection is. But you know what's even more important?